my question comes in is how much thought and research have we put into this? I'm a former school bus driver, drove school bus for 8 years, 35 years in the business. School buses are the safest mode of ground transportation in the United States. Only thing safer is commercial airlines. And so to me, there's been a lot of thought process going into the design of school buses, the color of school buses and everything that have proven to be very effective. And that's the reason we're, the safest mode of ground transportation. Now all of a sudden we're jumping into a mandate about seat belts and that type of deal. And if you watch a video of a bus rollover, you start thinking, oh, it sounds like a good idea. But if I think about a bus going into the water, that's a death trap. I think about a bus, and I had one catch on fire one time after a wreck and get engulfed in flames pretty fast. Fortunately, no kids were on it, but I think about, goodness, if they were seatbelted in, especially my younger kids, that's not a good thing. The worst school bus accident in Texas was in, I believe, Alton, Texas, 1989, and a bus got hit full of juniors and high school kids, junior high and high school kids, went into a quarry at 10 foot of water. I think it killed 21 of them, and they weren't seatbelted in. So when I start thinking about it, I don't know that a lot of thought's gone in this. And now we're talking about, well, now we got to retrofit buses, okay? Well, manufacturers aren't going to want to warranty those after you've retrofit them because they've been designed and tested with the National Highway, Administration, everything, in compartmentalization, which is what we talk about, the way the seats are designed and everything. And now you want to put seat belts. Well, there goes that type of warranty. Who's going to ensure the kids are buckled in? What happens if a kid's not buckled in and you have an accident? I just see lots of different things going on that I don't know that we put a lot of thought. Then we start talking about cost. We're getting prices from from the bus manufacturers of anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000. So I've got buses that are, say, 10 years old, and that's probably the bulk of my fleet is probably 10 years old. Well, I'm only going to get about 15 years out of them because after 15 years, the manufacturers don't make parts for them anymore. So, yeah, they quit mass producing parts. So now finding parts becomes a problem. So am I going to put $50,000 into a 10-year-old bus, that I'm going to get 5 more years out of? Well, what about buying a new bus? Well, in the last 9 years, I've watched buses go up $100,000. That bus you're looking at behind us to buy a brand new one of those today, $225,000. That I'm going to get 15 years out of if I'm lucky. And that's assuming parts are being made and mass produced. And so that becomes a challenge. Now you start looking at the cost of this across the state. There's roughly 30 to 40,000 school buses. Figure 10 to 15% are not going to even qualify to be retrofitted. So you got to figure a $225,000 cost there. And then you figure the other ones, if the manufacturers even had the capacity to retrofit enough of them, then you're talking roughly, numbers I put in, we're talking north of $2 billion of taxpayer money. And I'm going, what are we benefiting out of this? What are our kids benefiting? Are we really benefiting more safety? Because I don't know that we are. To me, I think the legislature needs to go back and really take a deep look at this and say, is this really a good idea? Because sometimes we pass bad laws that need to be amended, need to be changed. To me, I look at this and see it very much that way.
The state reached out to any your school district, any school district said, hey, do y'all need help with this situation?
Well, they have asked all of us to go in and we do a study of this and look at, what the cost is going to be for us, and then our board passed a resolution about whether we can afford this or not. For us, I'm looking at, goodness, on the cheapest side of trying to retrofit everything I can retrofit and just replacing what I have to, I'm talking, probably $4 to $5 million likely. If I have to go in, if I didn't want to retrofit a 10-year-old bus, which I don't know is the best move, now you're probably getting north of $12 million. And you start looking at the cost of that for my taxpayers, we can't sustain that. Not at the current funding levels. Is the state going to come in? I mean, I thought we were away from doing unfunded mandates. I see this as very much as an unfunded mandate. It's easy to pass requirements when you don't have to pay for it. It's another thing when my taxpayers do. We roughly have around 60 buses, and we run probably the bare minimum. We're going to run probably 45 on a daily basis, but then also whenever we have trip buses, we have to have backup buses when a bus goes down. And when you've got 45 buses, you're going to have buses down here and there all the time. How long does it take for us to get it fixed? So I've got to have buses that can go into there. I also have shuttle buses that, my buses may be on trip, but I'm running people back and forth from, say, the junior high campus to say the stadium or something for practice or something like that. So when you look at all of it, I mean, the bare minimum I can get away with is probably going to be roughly 50 buses, and that's on That's on a minimum. And that means, when you're going to a Friday night football game and you got a football team and band and cheerleaders and everybody going, and you got bus routes going on, not everybody's going to get there at the same time, So it's a challenge in itself. And fortunately for us, I think we do a very good job. Our bus mechanics do a fantastic job of taking care of our buses and getting the full lifespan we can get out of them. Like I say, the biggest problem we run into is getting parts. After a bus is 15 years old, they're not manufacturing anymore. So now you got to find it on somebody's shelf, or maybe you've got to find it somewhere else. And so it's been a challenge, but I think our guys do a great job. But I know that, we're big enough to where we have, enough help to do that, and it's still a challenge. I can't imagine what it's going to be for some of the smaller schools that aren't that fortunate, because they don't have enough of the buses and, to get a full-time mechanic on site and things of that nature.
Speaking of other schools, have you talked to other districts about this situation and how they're dealing with the situation?
Well, we brought it up today at our superintendent, our Region 7 superintendent's meeting. I brought it up there about, the challenge that I see, and it was, very obvious that throughout the room, everybody has the same concerns, and everybody's seeing the same challenges.
Best outcome for school districts here in the state of Texas?
Well, you'd like to see the legislature take it up and say, hey, we need to do some more studying on this. Maybe we want to, instead of going in and retrofitting a bunch of older buses, maybe we want to take and grandfather those, and let's start looking at this, moving forward, and let's make sure that we've done enough studying to see, does this really make everybody safer on the bus in the multitude of scenarios we can have? Because that's the big question. As a former bus driver, our number one thing here is we want to get kids, to school and back home safe and sound. And so safety is the number one thing, but when we make a decision that just seems like a good idea, have we really done the research to make sure, is this going to make us safer? If it is, hey, it's hard to argue with. I get that. We just got to figure out how we're going to pay for it then. But I don't know that we've really studied this enough to decide that yet. And if we have, I haven't seen, nobody shared enough of that with me to convince me.